Psychology is a beautiful mix of the empirical and spiritual, science and soul. Philosophy informs biology, and vice versa. It makes sense that the study of the mind, an object that has evaded concrete definition since the dawn of consciousness, would involve such a peculiar form of methodology. This wasn't always the case, as, at the turn of the 19th century, psychology was stuck between philosophical speculation and pure science. This all changed with the work of William James, the father of psychology as we know it today. Today's video is sponsored by Endel. One of the largest struggles I found over the past semester is balancing YouTube with school. I noticed myself getting distracted by one or the other and really lacking in any mental clarity, something that's pretty important in order to be both creative and productive. Thankfully, I found Endel, an environment-based nonprofit app that takes everything we know about sound and combines it with cutting-edge technology. The result is real-time personalized soundscapes designed to help you relax, focus, and sleep. How does this work exactly? Endel uses AI-powered and patented core technology to react to inputs like time of the day, weather, heart rate, and location in order to create a custom soundscape for whatever you're trying to do. Endel also helps you boost productivity by helping you concentrate for longer periods of time, relax you through calming your mind to create feelings of comfort, and most importantly for me, sleep by soothing you into a deep state of rest and relaxation. If you're in need of some semblance of focus, then head on over to the link in the description and download Endel today. The first 100 people to download Endel will get a free week of audio experiences. In New York City, 1842, William James was born in a luxury hotel to an incredibly intelligent and cosmopolitan family. His father, Henry James Sr., was a wealthy Swedenborgian theologian. His godfather was none other than Ralph Waldo Emerson, and his brother was the famous writer Henry James Jr. James would be educated in German and French, and encouraged to take interest in other cultures and the world at large. This was likely catalyzed by his family trips to Europe, where James would develop an interest in painting and drawing. Young William's passion for art was encouraged by his family, as they moved in order to allow for him to take an apprenticeship under William Morris Hunt. However, he gave up after 1 year, foreshadowing a lifetime of insecurity and doubt over what he should do with his life. Urged by his father to study medicine, James would initially specialize in physiology and later take up studying nervous systems and psychology at Harvard. Afterwards, James would study medicine in 1864. However, he would take a short break in 1865 to travel up the Amazon River with the Harvard naturalist Louis Agassiz, famous for his work on glaciology and the megalodon. Sadly, James would leave the trip after only 8 months due to seasickness and smallpox. Upon his resume of study, James would be stricken by a severe bout of depression. Worsened by his deteriorating health, James decided to take some time and travel to Germany, where he would study at the University of Berlin. While there, he became deeply interested in philosophy and psychology, and picked up books by Wundt, Kant, Goethe, and Schiller. He felt that thinking about the mind and spirit treated his soul. In 1869, shortly before he would earn his degree, James visited an insane asylum as a medical student. There he met an epileptic patient who appeared to him in a state of severe mental decline. This led to a return to James' depressive symptoms. As he learned more and more about the science of the individual, he became increasingly worried that determinism was the innate function of the universe. Seeing this patient brought forth the idea that he too could sink into such a state, and that there would be no way to prevent it. However, in 1870, James read the French neo-Kantian Charles Renouvelier's account of believing in his own freedom in the absence of any evidence. This greatly informed James's opinion of free will and alleviated his depression. William James would marry Alice Gibbons in 1878 and begin an illustrious career as a lecturer and professor. While teaching, he drew upon the works of Helmholtz, who wrote on the philosophy of science and perception, as well as Pierre Janet, who wrote about hypnotherapy, dissociation, and traumatic memory. From this, he developed the first course on scientific psychology at Harvard, as well as create the first psychology lab in America. While teaching, James earned a great reputation as a humble, engaging, and caring professor. He had many famous students, including Gertrude Stein, W.E.B. Du Bois, and Theodore Roosevelt. Unfortunately, his worsening health began to impede upon his ability to lecture. While teaching in Stanford, James was interrupted by the Great San Francisco Earthquake. He would come to fear an early death before he could fully develop his philosophical system, and so he retired in 1907. His retirement was productive as he would write 3 important books: Pragmatism, A Pluralistic Universe, and The Meaning of Truth. Despite sailing to Europe for a cure to his severe cardiac pain, William James would pass away from heart failure in 1910. William James is perhaps best known for elevating psychology to science while retaining its more abstract and philosophical aspects. He would regard psychology as a science of mental phenomena and consciousness, which are evidently difficult subjects to study. Nonetheless, he set about establishing a theory surrounding mental processes. James characterized human thinking into 5 general dimensions. Firstly, it is under the ownership of a personal self, or sense of self. Secondly, it's in a constant flux and is never truly static. Thirdly, there is nonetheless an ongoing and constant continuity. Fourthly, it normally deals with objects that are separate from itself. Here James distinguishes the empirical me, or the self as an object, from the pure I, or subject that we call the ego and refer to as the soul. One is more considerably difficult to measure than the other. Finally, James argues that human thinking tends to take an interest in certain objects over others. How do we think? William James sets about mapping mental activity as followed. Firstly, we sense something. Then our sensations become perceptions. We then use our imagination to retrieve mental copies of past sensations and match them to our current perception. Finally, belief is used to sense whether the idea formed in imagination is correspondent with reality. James also developed a theory of emotion. He suggests that many emotions are natural, such as fear. However, we also learn certain emotions, such as the desire to earn a promotion or the fear of failure. He also argued against the idea that perception triggers emotional responses, which then lead to bodily expressions. Instead, he argued that perception triggers bodily expressions, which then lead to emotion. James' work extended far past psychology, and much of his thought also deals with difficult philosophical topics. He would go on to reject the a priori existential truths of those such as Hegel that propose a sort of rationalism in our world. Instead, he would advocate for pragmatism, which measures truth based upon the practical application of particular ideas. To better define pragmatism, James presents us with a common tension he assumes to be present in the minds of many intellectuals. There is a tender-minded approach, which he defines as rationalism, intellectualism, and a belief in free will. Such a view holds open the possibility of a divine plan, religious hope, and the possibility of eternal truths. However, there is also a tough-minded approach, which he defines as a mix of empiricism, pessimism, determinism, and overall skepticism. This view deals with evidence firstly, even if it's uncomfortable. James goes on to argue that most of us desire to hold a view that is faithful to the tough-minded approach of facts and uncomfortable truths, while also remaining open to the tender-minded approach. How do we reconcile this tension? Pragmatism, he believes, is a worldview that solves this dilemma by assessing the world as is, while also taking into account the epistemology of humans. For example, to believe in an absolute God is to satisfy our need to find meaning in everything. However, it would also devalue another apparent desire, the human need to believe we are free or the authors of our destiny. An absolute God under pragmatism shouldn't be entertained. Of course, this assumes many things, such as there is a supposedly universal desire to believe in free will. James believes that belief under pragmatism follows under 4 postulates that, to him, are forever unknowable: the existence of God, the possibility of immortality, free will, and moral duty. We must pick a side before we can undergo any pragmatic examination. On the concept of morality, James is heavily invested in the argument for and against free will. Although he argues that we cannot scientifically prove or disprove free will, he nonetheless argues that we should believe in it under pragmatism. James uses the example of a gruesome murder to do so. The natural response to hearing that someone has been killed is a sort of regret. How could such a thing happen? If we are a determinist, someone who believes that all is unchanging and fixed, then what has happened would have happened no matter what. From this, we still have a sense of tragedy, although it has now expanded to a metaphysical level. We ask ourselves, why is the world like this? Why does the world work towards such suffering and pain? James identifies this as pessimism, an awfully uncomfortable position where we feel that the universe is not how it should be, but also understand that this is meant to be. James suggests that the determinist could become an optimist. We could simply remove regret and believe that murder is a part of a bigger plan that actually improves the world. Here James takes a personal stance. Although he notes that some determinists could take such a happy stance, many of us may struggle to override such feelings of regret and guilt. In fact, the deterministic stance undermines our natural tragic response to murder. Acts of suffering are unpreventable and will happen, and we will not know why. Such a stance renders this meaningless, and so from this, James commits to indeterminism and argues that believing in human freedom allows for a life of meaning. On the meaningfulness of life, James suggests that happiness is the motivator behind our capacity to act and endure. However, we must believe that life can become worth living first, and then act on that belief. Specifically, he argues that happiness, that which makes life meaningful, requires ideals, a desire to reach them, and the belief that we are making progress towards such ideals. William James, far removed from the contemporary dynamic approach to psychology, a mix of philosophy, sociology, biology, and cognition, paved the way for the field to find empirical relevance. Perhaps more importantly, he offers us a system of thinking intimately close to how we experience the world each and every day. It's not perfect, of course, but reading his theories behind thinking, identity, and freedom are, to this day, striking in their ability to illustrate and articulate the complex world of existing.